hold the line. And how are you going to hold the line? You're going to put your back into this and make sure we do not give an inch on making sure that this vote, only legal, chain of custody, certifiable votes are counted. I want to go back to Arizona and Representative Mark Finchem. Mark was the driving force in back of that 11-hour presentation of all the essential criminality that went on, incompetence and criminality in Arizona. So, Mark, the one thing I want to ask you before I know the fractional voting, this all gets down to the proprietary software, which is a scam. Voters who paid for this, citizens and taxpayers who paid for this, should have a full right for their representatives to go in there and look at and get into the details of Dominion voting systems, whether it's in Ware County, Georgia, Antrim County, Michigan, or out there in Maricopa County, Arizona. This is outrageous. And this thing of standing in back of and having the states in Nevada, this huge fiasco we had over the weekend about when a judge ordered that the states sitting there arguing about the proprietary software. One of the things the states are trying to protect is to get in there and find out about how this stuff's actually supposed to be tabulated, and this fractional thing gets into, is it calculated or is it actually a tabulation? And so this is what it's all, this is a rat's nest. That's why people got to continue to press this. Mark, one last thing I want to finish with you. There was a Twitter war all weekend, start with Trump supporters, deplorables, and people who just want to count the legal votes versus the establishment. Guys, chiefs of staff, other people thrown in. What is going on in Arizona in the Republican Party? Why can't it seem like, why is the establishment so dug in that they don't want to pursue any of these vectors, either Liz Harris's illegal voting vector, the Dominion systems vector, or the fake mail-in ballot vector? Why is the establishment out there at every level, from Rusty Bowers, the Speaker of the House, all the way to these factotums, and including the upper echelons, including the governor? Why are they dug in against the people out there?
2 words: cash flow. Donald Trump has interfered with their cash flow, and they don't like it. They don't care. You know, what I find interesting is a lot of these people that got elected wouldn't have gotten elected without Donald Trump. Now, all of a sudden, they're turning their backs on him. Now, I want to be really clear. This is not about the person Donald Trump. This is about the dependability, the reliability, the patency of our elections. Because if this is allowed to stand, we're done as a nation. We are done as a nation. So, you know, I'm going to renew my call. If you've seen something, say something, because I can tell you right now, there are a number of us who are going to be calling for grand jury investigations where we can identify people on video. We want to get right up in their grill, and we want an investigation as to what they knew, when they knew it, how did they participate, and who can they name. So the window of opportunity is going to start closing. If you want to be a whistleblower, not be a really good time to come forward. And if you want to get rolled up in this thing as one of the bad guys, okay, that's your call.
Okay,
but we are just absolutely.
Mark, we're going to get the Liz Harris information up. Any other information about the rally from 3 to 5 p.m. today that you can give us right now? We're going to put it up on the site and push it out later in the show. But anything you can give us before you bounce?
All right, 1700 West Washington Street in Phoenix. That is the Capitol complex. The expectation is that there's going to be thousands of people there. Starts at 3 o'clock, should be done by 5. There will be a press conference from 4-ish to 5 o'clock, probably with some questions. But at the end of the day, if you're not there to make your voice heard, this whole exercise, we just need help. We need to have your help, your voice, your body be there. All right?
Okay, Mark, we'll push this and we'll cover it on the 5 o'clock show today. Social media, how do people get access to you during the day?
At markfinchem.com on both Parler and Twitter, or you can send an email to me at markfinchem@me.com. I'm trying to answer all of them. And please, if you've got a lead, put lead or crime report, whatever, in the subject line, because I'm trying to prioritize this. We're getting a lot of leads that are our material. So we'd love to hear from you.
Mark Finchem, thank you very much for joining us from Southern Arizona this morning.
Pleasure.
We'll be all over the rally this afternoon. Also, there's going to be a rally tomorrow in Lansing, in Michigan. There's a live meeting going on with senators in Georgia. We're going to be picking back up at the 5 o'clock show. Want to now go to Mark Serrano, the comms partner with the Thomas More Society and the Phil Klein project, who's done an amazing job of dropping these lawsuits across different states. Mark Serrano, though, had a white paper done that was absolutely from one of the senior members, I guess, out of Claremont, to talk about what was going to happen this week, about the media coming in here and saying, hey, it's over. You ran out of time. Safe harbor is on Tuesday the 8th. You've got the Electoral College meets on the 14th. Sorry, not sorry. You've run out of time. So, Mark, walk us through what your white paper said. How did you think about this in advance, and what is the media already doing? You were on the Saturday morning show. Everything you said happened about what the media was going to start saying over the weekend is starting to happen, correct?
Steve, look, just like we predicted on War Room on Saturday, the headlines have begun. Look at this one from the New York Daily News. Donald Trump lost, and it's about to be official. That's from this morning. And what are they referencing? The safe harbor date of December 8th. These headlines have begun, and they're going to be all over the mainstream media because they're going to claim that the clock has run out. So what the Amistad Project did with data experts and attorneys was take a look and see, where do these dates come from? December 8th for electors to meet in the state capitals, be selected, and then the 14th for them to vote. But let me just tell you something. That came from according to our white paper, it came from federal statute 1948. But here's what's the problem with it is, that does not supersede what's in the U.S. Constitution. The only deadline in the U.S. Constitution, of course, Steve, is 12 noon, January 20th, when the president assumes office. But here's a very important point about this, Steve, is the way safe harbor the provision is written, it suggests that the December deadlines don't apply if the election was not conducted according to state law. And that's exactly what we're seeing, for instance, in Pennsylvania, where, thank goodness, Justice Alito has moved the deadline up for Congressman Mike Kelly's lawsuit for the state to respond to it by tomorrow morning for this very reason. He's demonstrating and proving in his suit that the election was not held lawfully, and therefore these dates don't apply, and that's what our white paper shows.
Is your white paper? I know it's getting traction in the War Room and among the War Room posse, and everybody's passing around. I think National Pulse wrote it up. Do you see this getting traction in a broader context, or are people just going to start rolling over, particularly conservatives, now that the mainstream media is going to come in starting tomorrow and carpet bomb that this thing is over, this is the safe harbor, you've got all these states coming in now, we're all going to prep for the Electoral College on the 14th, so you can run around and have all your lawsuits, you can have all your state legislatures, but it's over. Do you see this white paper in your whole theory of the case starting to get traction?
It's starting to get traction thanks to War Room followers, your posse, and then other conservative outlets who recognize how critical it is for us to distinguish the difference between the federal statute and what's called for in the U.S. Constitution, where state legislatures have the authority to oversee lawful elections in their states. Absolutely, we got traction that's begun. And here's what's very important, Steve, is it is our job, it's imperative on us and the War Room posse to make it as uncomfortable as possible, especially for Republicans, but also elected officials, as uncomfortable as possible to claim that these dates should apply when we've had unlawful elections in these states. And, Mark Finchem stated it perfectly, which is we need more investigation. You take a look at that tape that came from the Mass Ballot Counting Center in Atlanta the other day. That is a game changer because that visual shows there is evidence, there is demonstrated proof, and we are building that case. That's what's important here. Not that we can prove conclusively, and so all these lawsuits should be decided, but that there is plenty that must be investigated further so that these state legislatures can decide that these were not lawful elections, and therefore these results should not be certified, and the dates of the 8th and the 14th do not apply under the same federal statute that defined those dates back in 1948.
Walk me through why Justice Alito, in your mind, moved that date from the 9th to the morning of the 8th?
I suspect, and this is just my own sort of insight and interpretation, I suspect it's because of recognition that the state would drag it out as long as possible, that the safe harbor date would be manipulated. The state itself, if it was allowed to go past the safe harbor date, before it provided its response. It would just add to the momentum, the idea that the state needs to certify the dates. They have to stick on this artificial timeline. So I believe Justice Alito recognized the dynamics with that date and wanted to get out ahead of it. I think it was a very important move. It was a shrewd move. So that way, lawful elections can be upheld by each of these states. And it's going to be the same situation in Wisconsin and Michigan and Georgia and Arizona. These legislators, look, Steve, you and I both know some of these state legislators or elected officials are not going to have the backbone. We've got to make it uncomfortable for them, but we also have to help them, provide for them more and more evidence as it comes forward from people who saw something, who observed something, who have concern about something. A whistleblower doesn't have to prove, by the way, that they observed fraud. They just have to bring forth any evidence or a witness, a statement from them that says, here's what I saw, here's what I observed that didn't seem to be right. It seemed to be an anomaly or irregularity.
Mark, you're and have been for many decades a communications specialist. You're seeing now polling in Georgia. It says 58% of the people down there want a special session called. 53% are saying there's something wrong, that illegal activity took place in the Georgia vote. Wisconsin now that has this great court case going, I think that the legislature's actually said on the 11th, they're going to hold a hearing. And I'm hearing that's because of pressure that's being put on by people. So in these different states, you're starting to see the tide turn of people actually understanding as more and more of this information gets forced out through the system, although the mainstream media won't cover it. Do you sense that too? Do you sense that we're now starting to get some groundswell of people are saying, hey, you know, there's so many verticals. There's the Dominion voting system, there's this, the illegal ballots, and then there's a lack of chain of custody on the mail-in ballots. Those three big vectors show that something's up. Are you getting a sense as a communication specialist that the tide is turning here as far as awareness goes?
No doubt. No doubt there is a shift that's taking place right now. And again, I'm going to tip my hat to the War Room Posse. It's patriots like those that are with you every single day, Steve, that have been telling this story, expressing their concerns since Election Day about how these elections were managed. And I think this polling is going to continue to trend in that same direction because of the fear and concern that this election was not managed. Look, everybody has their own suspicions. They have their own perceptions of things, like how on earth could Joe Biden outperform Barack Obama, all right? But you can't just go on suspicion. You have to demonstrate and prove it. But day by day, more of that evidence comes forward. And yes, there is more of a groundswell of people who are looking at this and looking at it sort of cockeyed and realizing, wait a second, this doesn't add up, and we've got to get the demonstrated proof. If you take a look at how we got here, Steve, Mark Zuckerberg pumped $400 million into these elections. We've been talking about it for months. We've got the demonstrated proof. We have court-ordered documents that demonstrate that he put money through a nonprofit called the Center for Tech and Civic Life, and that nonprofit, run by former Obama operatives, they gave grants to cities, and those grants had requirements.
Mark, can you hang
like
on?
in Philadelphia.
Mark, can you hang on 1 second? I just want to hold you over the break. I want to finish this for the audience. Mark Serrano, the communications partner with the Thomas More Society and the Amistad Project, Phil Klein, is going to return in just a moment.
It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over, 'cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Dominion voting systems are being looked at now from Ware County, Georgia, to Antrim County, Michigan, to Clark County, Nevada. There's pressure on to do it in Maricopa County in Arizona. That's just one vector. You have the illegal vote vector, the old scams, and they've got it from illegal alien voting to people that are too young to vote, to people who are not registered in the state to vote, felons that voted, people from post office boxes, from federal buildings, people who are dead, right? And hundreds of thousands of those, right, in these critical states. Then it's all the chain of custody of the mail-in ballots. Georgia Star, Michael Patrick Leahy, another brilliant report. We're going to have him on at 5 o'clock. 500,000 ballots because of Stacey Abrams, the consent decree, and these drop boxes with no chain of custody. This was stolen in a very sophisticated, coordinated way with 3 vectors. Vector number 1, the old-fashioned way, just every different type of category. The second was the chain of custody on the mail-in ballots, which we talked about till we were blue in the face, starting in June and July. And, of course, then the Dominion voting systems, which we're going to get into that. And you know the reason they're protecting this bogus proprietary software information in every state where they argue, oh, we got a vendor, can't do that, it's proprietary, it's going to get down to this thing of fractional voting. Is this truly tabulation or is it calculation? I want to bring in now back president of Proactive Communications. That's the communications partner for the Thomas More Society and the Amistad Project, Phil Klein, and the great work they're doing in multiple states across the country, Mark Serrano. Mark, what I'm so proud of you guys identified this also months ago of how this was all going to be financed and how it's going to be in the connective tissue of how it's going to be executed on. Walk us through that. Walk us through Zuckerberg, the checks he wrote, but also what they got local governments to agree to, and nobody at the time, because it was hidden behind the curtain, actually understood how they were hardwiring in private left-wing organizations, hardwired into the system that nobody knew about.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Steve, if you take a look at it once we were able to dig in. And all the credit in the world goes to Phil Klein, his litigation teams, researchers at the Amistad Project, and the support from the Thomas More Society. They started in 2019 and recognized in the spring what was happening, which was a group, a nonprofit, a 501c3 named the Center for Technology and Civic Life, which before this year never had a budget greater than $1 million and is run by former Obama operatives. They started reaching out to mayors in cities like Racine, Wisconsin, and they started providing seed capital for them to reach out to other Democrat-run cities to take those funds so that they could provide grants, submit grant applications to CTCL. This is before CTCL even got any money, okay, beyond their typical budget. And what they did was, on September 2nd, Mark Zuckerberg, at the time he announced he was contributing $300 million. We think it's up to $500 million since then. He announced another $100 later to CTCL. $300 million, $400 million. Do you know the federal government that they allocated, what they allocated for election management under coronavirus? $400 million. Mark Zuckerberg matched the federal government expenditure. He used CTCL to funnel the money to these Democrat-run cities. Now, they'll tell you, well, it's just for coronavirus, and we've spread the money out all over the country to rural areas and urban areas. But, Steve, the top 21 recipients of Zuckerberg grant money, which totaled $80 million, all went to Democrat-run cities where Hillary Clinton won by a large margin, in swing states primarily. And so what they did was they put money into Philadelphia and Milwaukee and Detroit and Minneapolis, just like David Plouffe had stated should happen in his book he published in March, A Voter's Guide to Defeating Donald Trump. And he said this election will be determined based on a street-by-street street fight in places like Detroit and Milwaukee and Philadelphia. And here's what they did, Steve. The grant contracts that we have gotten a hold of through court order, the grant contracts show what they demanded, expected from these cities. So in Philadelphia, for instance, where they provided $10.6 million, they required a minimum of 800 polling places in Philadelphia, 800 ballot locations where people could bring their ballots. They funded drop boxes placed out all over the city for people to drop in where there's no chain of custody and where surveillance video cameras were supposed to be covering those drop boxes. Where's the surveillance video? Let's see it. For every single drop box, let's see the surveillance video. And they also used that money to pay for voting machines, to pay for election judges. So think of this, Steve. It's clear that they created these large consolidated ballot counting centers. They funded it with Zuckerberg money. Zuckerberg, who has all the incentive in the world to keep Section 230 in place in the FCC Act. And so this, to me, in my view, was a small investment for Zuckerberg to make. And he paid for the election judges, and then the election officials kicked Republicans out of the ballot centers to observe the votes or obstructed them if they were in place. And the ballot counting went on behind closed doors. Republicans were kicked out, as Phil Klein says, and a billionaire was led in the middle of the ballot counting center. This is how they concocted this scheme to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars to impact these elections in major urban areas in the swing states.
Unbelievable. Tell us where do you think we stand right now? Before we let you go, Mark, where do you think we stand on this fight? Right now, you have outrage in all these different states. People are coming up with more evidence every day. Your white paper says, hey, they're going to try to shut everything down starting tomorrow. Where do you think this fight heads? I know Klein's in court in different locations. There's just been a huge new lawsuit filed in Pennsylvania. You've got great lawsuit going through the Supreme Court going up to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. They're going to start having hearings in Wisconsin. We're now all over the machines. I'm hearing that we're going to hear good stuff coming out of Atram, Michigan, the county. Where do you think we stand on Monday, December 7th, given that Safe Harbor's on the 8th and the Electoral College theoretically meets on the 14th?
Well, first of all, Amistad is filing its own suit in Pennsylvania today, by the way, and has filed suits in all these 5 or 6 top states. Look, here's where I think it goes. At this point, I think there's enough noise, enough evidence that's now coming forward more and more by the hour to give these state legislators some backbone so they can recognize that these safe harbor dates don't apply because there are questions about whether or not these were lawfully run elections. And the investigations must continue. So I think where things go is we're going to see action, obviously, from Justice Alito holding the state of Pennsylvania accountable tomorrow. More hearings coming up in these states, as you noted. And I believe these state legislators, look, I believe there are enough of them who want to do right by the U.S. Constitution, who are patriots and believe that we've got to have a certain outcome in this election. But, Steve, the implications are so great and so long-term that everything that we are curating right now will be very, very important as these cases go on, some of them way beyond January 20th. But thank goodness that we have demonstrated proof that these safe harbor dates do not apply because we believe that these were not lawful elections. So now I think where we go is a day-by-day, hour-by-hour process of bringing more evidence in, engaging state legislators. We're talking to state legislators, just like Rudy Giuliani did his roadshow last week, separate and apart from them. We're doing engaging state legislators to inform them. They're asking us for briefings. They're coming to us. They're saying, give us briefings about where things stand with the lawsuit in our state and why you think hundreds of thousands of ballots may have been fraudulently cast. And we're providing them those briefings at their request, and it's a process of informing them and giving them the strength to recognize the safe harbor dates don't apply. There's enough information to know that these elections may not have been lawfully conducted in your state, and hundreds of thousands of ballots may have been fraudulently cast. So that way, they can take action. They can call for investigations. They can conduct additional hearings to bring forth more evidence, and then these lawsuits can proceed. And with the process we're under now, one or more of them will reach the Supreme Court, and then they can take action from there.
Mark, what's your social media so people can follow you during the day? Because you're right. It's day by day. It's hour by hour right now. How can they follow you?
So on Parler and CloudHub. CloudHub is another social media platform. It's at Serrano, Serrano. And on Twitter, it's at Mark V. Serrano.
Mark Serrano, great patriot. Thank you for the work you're doing for Phil Klein, supporting Phil Klein. Just real patriots work. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
Do we have Raheem? I want to bring Raheem Kassam in, and Raheem's going to stay over the commercial break to be with us. Do we have Raheem? We can pull Raheem in. Raheem Kassam. Hey, Raheem, we got about a minute, and I want you to stay over. Give us your assessment. You've been following this all day. I know National Pulse is putting up story after story. Tell us where you think we stand on the eve of Safe Harbor.
Yeah, we do indeed have more and more coming out, and I think the this fractional voting one is going to become another big piece of this puzzle. I'll confess, it wasn't something that was even on my radar, but as the previous guests were talking about it, we've started looking more and more into it. And it's interesting. In 2009, you had a system which used GEMS, which was then sold to Dominion, fractional voting system, and is actually decertified in California. So there's a lot more to come out on this, on the fractional voting systems, and we'll have more details.
Raheem, hang on. I'm going to hold you over a break. I want to get your assessment of where we stand. Raheem Kassam of the National Pulse, editor-in-chief, also got the 3 o'clock show here on Real America's Voice, right after Tudor Dixon and Steve Gruber's Real America's Voice Alive. Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to be back with Raheem Kassam. We've also got a special guest, Michael Yan, the great combat correspondent, joins us. Take away the pump handle. All next on War and Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
This fight is going on across the nation, from Nevada and Arizona to Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Now I want to bring back in Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of the National Pulse, host of the National Pulse show later in the day on Real America Voice at 3 p.m. every day. Raheem, where do you think we stand? You know, we're now into it in December. The mainstream media is going to start clubbing everybody that this thing's over with the safe harbor tomorrow. Yet you have state legislatures that are thinking of coming back into session. You have big fights over that. You have evidence coming out. You get Dominion systems now are being analyzed. People are coming forward with literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of illegal votes. You have Liz Harris out in Arizona has 500 volunteers going door to door to prove that there are tens of thousands of illegal ballots that have been counted in Arizona when Trump only lost by 10,000. So where do you think we stand right now?
Yeah, and as you will recall, and as the audience will recall, we said that weeks and weeks, if not months ago, at this point, that if there was going to be fraud, if there was, a lack of clarity around what was happening, it's going to end up with people having to go door to door and check if individuals voted, and check if, dead people have voted, and if people who had moved away had voted. And it's an incredibly time-intensive and labor-intensive task. It requires thousands of people across all states, thousands of people in every single state, respectively, to make sure that this is done comprehensively and to get a sample size large enough that would allow you to take something material to a court and say, hey, this needs a review, this needs a hearing, this needs evidence, it needs discovery, and eventually may need a full-on re-election, a rerun of the whole election in some of these circumstances. Now, that's just one constituent part. So you see how large this problem is. Another one of them, and I agree with all of the guests who have been on in this hour, it is manifesting clearly against people's civil rights to know that their vote is counted, to block them from seeing what is in these systems, how these systems work, how they tabulate voting, whether or not they are fractionalizing voting. And that's really interesting because I was looking through some of the detail on that very system, which was called GEMS, a global election management system, which was bought by Dominion a couple of years ago. And whether Dominion uses that or not now, or uses some different version of it, I'm sure they'll have their part to say in that. But it's interesting, you had 4 years ago, and stretching back beyond that, very left-wing websites, the Daily Kos and very left-wing people, and these websites are all still up saying this system cannot be allowed to happen because it naturally, fraud almost naturally occurs in the system because of so many glitches. There was a tabulation in California which missed, I think, 137 votes in a very small local election, so they decertified it. That's another part of what we're looking at here. And of course, one of the most important and interesting and gripping parts of all of this was these hearings that we've seen, the video that came out of Georgia of the suitcases of ballots in the middle of the night after people had been dismissed, or at least told that there was going to be no more counting. This is now their excuse, of course. I don't know if you've heard that now. They say, hey, they weren't told to leave. They left of their own volition after being told that no more counting was going to happen. Well, that's one and the same thing, effectively. And so I think it's going to fall more and more to ordinary people, fall more and more outside of officialdom, to bring hearings together, to bring rallies together, to bring protests together, to bring investigations together. And when you think about this whole thing, when we were told from November the 5th, November the 4th, the 5th, hey, you're a conspiracy theorist, if you think that wasn't anything serious in terms of if you do think there was anything serious in terms of fraud at this election, and look what the crowd, look what we the people has done up to this point to prove actually so many discrepancies all around the country.
You see in Trafalgar's polling and John McLaughlin's polling in Georgia that 53% of the people think illegal activity went on in the Georgia to shift the Georgia election outcome. 53%. You're seeing 58% want a special session. This is why I say the real vote of Trump is somewhere between 53 and 58%. Do you think polling is going to start to show? Do you think the American people, beyond the 74 million that voted for Trump, do you think the word's starting to get out there? So starting to begin to have some uncertainty about what went on here?
Well, as I said in the first hour, what you saw in Georgia was not the rally of a loser. It wasn't the rally of people. It wasn't people going there thinking that they were there for a farewell tour, or thinking that they were there to say goodbye to President Trump. There is a growing consensus out there. And I think we're on the cusp also of some, pretty prominent left-wing figures even being able to step out and say, well, maybe things weren't right in this area or that area, and that will allow a wider conversation to be had. Look, you will hear from the mainstream media every hour after every hour, another court case lost, another, deference to a higher court or a lower court, a date change, whatever it is. You now got the date change brought forward a day, right, for the Supreme Court evidence in Pennsylvania. All of that, it's all detail, right? It's a lot of noise. The signal remains the same. The signal remains exactly the way you put it in 3 words: hold the line. Hold the line, because whether or not they claim tomorrow, the safe harbor deadline on the 8th is the final full date, whether they claim January the 20th is the final full date. I was speaking to somebody just last week, at the end of last week, and they said, no, Raheem, it doesn't work like that. Why? Because we're moving into uncharted and unprecedented territory. There is no final date for fraud to be rooted out in an American election. And whether it happens before January the 20th and whether it happens after January the 20th, remember, it's unprecedented. Anybody who tells you that you get past a certain date and you have to drop it, that's not true.
Raheem, how do people follow you during the day? What's the social media?
Just head on over to nationalpulse.com. We've got plenty of breaking news scoops going up there, as well as the buried leads that people don't pick out, especially related to this Forbes article that came out this weekend as well about the voter data theft. Lots of USB sticks seized over the course of this weekend. We're looking into that, what that means, what impact that has, and it's at Raheem Kassam on Twitter.
Raheem, thanks for joining us. Look forward to seeing you at 5 o'clock today after your show. Okay, want to turn now to Michael Yan, one of the great combat correspondents of his generation, the Iraq War, particularly Afghanistan. He's been out in the field for decades. Now back in the United States, has covered the Antifa and Black Lives Matter riots from Seattle to Portland, all over the country. But wrote a piece over the weekend. Michael, thank you for joining us. That I didn't know where it was going at first, but it absolutely hit me in the solar plexus at the end of it. Take away the handle is the term. Walk us through what you were talking about in London. I think it was before the Civil War in 1854, I think it was, or 1856. What you were making an analogy about today by going back to one of the great pandemics in world history. Can you walk us through what we're going to put this out, and we've got it up on the site. We're going to push it up as the lead. Walk us through this piece you wrote.
All right, Steve. I'd love to come on your show. It's one of the only places I can get pure water. As a war correspondent, I study pandemic. I've read more than 40 books just on pandemic, because pandemic and war and famine always go together. If you get a big war, you get a pandemic. If you get a pandemic, you'll get a war and a famine. They always go together. And so, through the years, I've just read so much. I've spent more than half my life overseas, often in third world countries, right? So studying diseases keeps me alive. for starters. And one of those diseases that often recurs is cholera, right? And so in the mid-19th century in London, cholera was striking very hard. And there was much research. Every pandemic they almost seem like the same.
And cholera is absolutely deadly. Back then, if you get cholera, you were going to leave the yard, right? Because there was no cure for it. It was unknown, but it was an absolutely brutal pandemic.
Absolutely. Cholera is horrific. It still kills maybe 100,000 people a year. Nobody actually knows. And but it's quite a number of people. It's a waterborne bacteria based illness, and it leads to dehydration, and the dehydration causes death, right? And so back in London, there was a pump called the Broad Street Pump, and it had the best water in London. So people would travel pretty far to get that water. And that happened to be the pump that was pumping out cholera. And so many people were dying from the cholera there. And then, of course, they were dehydrating. And so what do you do when you dehydrate? You drink more water. So they were drinking more water from the Broad Street Pump. And so then finally they removed the handle from the pump, and then the cholera stopped, right? And so this is very similar to mainstream media today. The pump handle is CNN. The pump handle is all these mainstream sources that keep pumping out the cholera that's killing so many people, literally killing people, causing people to spill onto the streets and fight and burn down their neighborhoods. You know, the cholera of today are mainstream outlets like CNN, and that's why I come on to your show.
And the power of the story, though, is the doctor that did the analysis went to the authorities and said, because this pump was the pump, the freshest, the coldest, the best water in London, and that's why people went to it. And he said, hey, I've looked at the analysis. If you look, this is where the disease is coming from. And they at first were like, give me a break. And eventually he said, I got a solution. Let's try something. Take away the handle. And when they took away the handle, the epidemic or pandemic in London essentially stopped. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so
that's why you'll often hear epidemiologists.
Yeah.
I've heard them say it on your show. We have to take away the handle. I've heard people say it right on your show. The virologist and the epidemiologist and whatnot say we've got to take away the handle. The handle now are outlets like CNN and Facebook. Zuckerberg is a handle.
So how do you recommend, you say take away the handle. There you had someone actually do it. At the time, it was totally counterintuitive to how life was. What would you recommend to the audience? How do you, and particularly when they talk to their friends, how do you actually, in this media environment, take away the handle?
Well, I go to a better pump, which is, for instance, War Room Pandemic. You know, I have a great track record for being accurate on my predictions of Iraq, Afghanistan, Thailand, Hong Kong, Japan, Korea relations. And that's why the reason that I can do these things is not genius. It's because I look for the right pumps that have pure information coming out, not a bunch of cholera-laced disinformation, misinformation that comes from places like Fox and CNN. And the whole trick here is not genius. The trick is to find the sources of clean information.
Michael, how do people follow you on social media? How do they get more Michael Yon? Because you do such an amazing job of following where these riots are throughout the country. I know you're here. You probably go back overseas at some point in time, but how do people get more Michael Yon?
Well, they can go to my Patreon, Michael Yon. My last name is Y-O-N, Yankee Oscar November. And everything is self-funded, which it has been since 2005. So I work on support donations. That's how I've been able to stay clean from advertisers that can influence my work, is just doing self-funding. In fact, I think I sort of led the way on this in 2005, starting self-funding in the field war correspondent work.
No, you were a great hero of Andrew Breitbart. That's how we met. Was Andrew Breitbart said, hey, this is the best war correspondent out there. Michael, thank you for joining us, and thanks for the piece. We're going to push it out hard. Take away the handle. Michael Yon, thank you so much for joining us on War Room Pandemic.
I love coming on your show, Steve.
Thanks, brother. Love having you on. The audience does too. Okay, there's rallies throughout the country. We're going to, at the 5 o'clock show today, we're going to be covering the one in Arizona. Kylie Kremer, the young woman who helped put together with her mom the March for Trump back about a month ago, is planning on one on December 12th. She's going to be next to tell us how you can participate to support the president and hold the line. Next on War Room Pandemic.
Let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, there are rallies throughout the country. There's an uprising of righteous indignation from folks throughout the country that want to make sure that this election, only the legal votes count, only certifiable votes count, only votes that have chain of custody count. There's out in Phoenix today, there'll be in Lansing tomorrow, things going all over the place. A big one coming this weekend, December 12th. The young woman who helped put it on, Kylie Kremer, and her mom, got the last March for Trump done here in Washington, D.C. She's on a bus tour with her mom through all the battleground states. Kylie, thank you for joining us at War Room Pandemic. Tell us about how people can find out information about this massive march, this massive gathering that you're planning for the 12th of December.
Hey, Steve, thanks so much for having me. Yes, we are rolling on the buses right now. The March for Trump bus tour is going on leading up to the event in D.C. on December 12th at Freedom Plaza. And we are so excited. The momentum is so huge that we actually had to add a second March for Trump bus. We have Mike Lindell with us and some other great speakers along the tour. We're so grateful for you at War Room to be sponsoring us and to be a part of this. It's going to be absolutely massive in D.C. at Freedom Plaza, and people are coming from all across the country, and people are just so fired up. And the best part about it, Steve, is that these people love this president and are so enthusiastic about standing for him because he's been fighting for us for the last 4 years. So people can go to TrumpMarch.com. We are rolling through. We have an event today in Wisconsin, and we'll be heading all the way over to Pennsylvania.
We have, I think we just lost, we're trying to get her back on. That's Kylie Kremer. Make sure you go to the March for Trump. There's going to be a massive, the last one drew, 750,000, 1 million people. It absolutely dominated the city. In fact, some of the left-wing guys have cut something over the weekend where it says, I sit the streets now. We control the streets. Because of that peaceful march, it was a march of families. It was a march of supporters of President Trump. It was absolutely a joyous outpouring of support for President Trump, but also this kind of steely resolve that we're not going to back down. We're not going to let the vote be stolen. And it was very, very, very powerful. What they did over the weekend, some of the left-wing groups took my phrase, hey, we control the streets. And, of course, they put in back of it, all kind of activity of guys fighting, et cetera. So we control the streets, though. When you have a peaceful demonstration of families and citizens of every ethnicity, every race, every gender, every sexual preference, every religion, every color. It was really affirming of the scope of President Trump's movement. And here's the thing: it shows you, I think, and it reinforces once again the power of his victory. Remember, people that listen to the show, this is the most powerful audience in all media. Why is that? We've combined the deplorables with Lao Beijing. In the diaspora of China, you've got so many Chinese Americans are sitting here. Remember, they had a huge rally that day of the new federal state of China at this time, had the March for Trump. And in fact, most of the people in the new federal state of China joined the Trump march as it got organized. What you have here is people, basic citizens, a populist movement that's not prepared to back down, not prepared to have their betters, or not prepared to have the elites of the world tell them, hey, this is just the way this election is. Right now, you see throughout this country in three basic broad verticals: old-fashioned, just stealing votes, whether illegal alien votes, whether people underage, people not registered in the states, to the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of votes. And in Georgia, I think it's 150,000 votes now, as they laid out at that hearing the other day. Then you've got the no chain of custody of the mail-in ballots, which we told you about for months. This was an election administration issue, and this is now coming to the forefront, particularly in places like in Georgia. And then the last, you've got this whole fiasco with the Dominion voting systems that we have to get to the bottom to. And so I want to end here. I want to end in a very special way. By the way, we'll get Kylie back on at the 5 o'clock show. We had a tough time hooking in her. Remember, go to March for Trump, this huge rally on the 12th. But today's a sacred day in American history. It's Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. We want to end with I want to end with how we began, with the live radio broadcast from NBC that puts you right in the spot. This is Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Tomorrow is when 79 years ago is when Franklin Delano Roosevelt went to Congress with the Day of Infamy speech, but he was talking about today a day of infamy. Those sailors still in the USS Arizona are still buried at Pearl Harbor on the ship. And look at what's happening in the state of Arizona today. It's in their memory that we're doing this fight. It's in the memory of every individual, every soldier, every sailor, every airman that was lost at Pearl Harbor. 2,400 killed, 1,100 casualties, 1,100 wounded. One of the bloodiest days in American history, brought America into World War II, which America led the Allies in finishing, I think, in 3.5 years. So in their memory today, we want to end the show as we started with the live radio broadcast of NBC Radio as they live coverage from Pearl Harbor at 7:48 in the morning.
And now we take you to Honolulu. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, NBC. Hello, NBC. This is KGU in Honolulu, Hawaii. I am speaking from the roof of the Advertiser Publishing Company building. We have witnessed this morning the distant view, the battle off Pearl Harbor, and a severe bombing of Pearl Harbor by enemy planes, undoubtedly Japanese. The city of Honolulu has also been attacked and considerable damage done. This battle has been going on for nearly 3 hours. It is no joke, it is a real war. How much damage has been done, but it has been a very severe attack. The Navy and Army appear now to have the air and the sea under control. Absolutely. I interrupt this just a second, please. This is the telephone company, the chief operator. Yes. We try to get you on an emergency call. Could you tell me? Well, we're talking to New York now. Please, 1, 2. One moment, please.